Hello?
You know, it's always hard to remember what the very first movie I ever saw in theaters was. My very early childhood memories are pretty foggy. I can't even remember where I even lived back then. But I think the very first movie I ever saw in theaters was Finding Nemo in 2003. This is one of those movies where I actually really like it more as an adult than I did as a kid. Like, as a kid, I enjoyed Finding Nemo. I always liked this movie and all. But when I rewatched it recently as an adult, and really thinking about it, this is now in my top 3 all-time favorite Pixar movies. This movie just hit me hard when I watched it again. I won't go that much into it here, since it's pretty personal to me, but all I'll say is that I relate to some of the themes in this movie. But that's all I'll say since I don't want to go into it. But this film is just amazing. The story is well crafted, the animation still holds up. I mean, the water still looks really good nearly 20 years later. Like, look at it, it's so gorgeous. I think of all the Pixar movies, Finding Nemo has gotta have my favorite side characters. It's kind of a tie between this and Monsters Inc. for me in terms of which cast of characters I think are my favorite in Pixar history. But the Tank Gang, the Sharks, and who can forget the legendary Crush? Just so many memorable characters that I remember as much and honestly even more than the main characters themselves. Not to say the main characters are bad, no, far from it. In fact, they're great too, and the voice acting overall is top notch. So yeah, I love Finding Nemo, and in case you were wondering, I do also enjoy Finding Dory quite a bit. I know some people are pretty indifferent towards it, but I still really like it, and the themes in that movie hit me a lot too, like, wow. But anyways, so for video games, I had 2 of them growing up. I played the Game Boy Advance game that came in that double pack with that Monsters Inc. game I mentioned in a previous video. Though for that double pack, I mostly played the Monsters Inc. game. I barely touched the Finding Nemo game. But there is this PC game called Learning with Nemo, which I did play more of. Obviously, it's an educational game, but it's really cute. Though I'm curious if anyone has ever played this. There is like no footage of this game that I can find online. I still have the game, but I haven't played it in a long time. I don't know, maybe I'll check it out again if I feel like going through my old PC games. But I think the game most people are familiar with when it comes to Finding Nemo games is the console game, simply called, well, Finding Nemo. Once again, you got THQ as our publisher and Traveler's Tales as our developers. However, unless you count LEGO Incredibles from 2018, this would actually be the last Disney Pixar game Traveler's Tales would actually develop. Yeah, starting with the Incredibles game, we actually would be getting a completely different developer handling the next couple Pixar games. So the Finding Nemo game came out on the PlayStation 2, the GameCube, and the OG Xbox. There was also a PC version, but unlike the previous Pixar games, it's actually a completely different game to the console versions, which I believe this is the only Pixar game to do that. Yeah, so a lot of licensed games during this time, particularly animated movies and cartoons, the PC versions would usually be a completely different game. I'm not sure why, honestly, it was always pretty weird. I never played this game, so I can't say anything about it, but it looks to be a pretty simple point-and-click game. Reminds me a lot of those PC SpongeBob games from around this time. And just note that if you see Finding Nemo on Steam, that is the PC point-and-click game, not the console version. Just thought I'd clarify that. But anyways, so the console game I've never played before, but I swear every time I went to a flea market, a retro game store, or go on eBay, I always saw a copy of this game, sometimes like 10 copies of it at once. This game is so common that I think people can literally make a living selling copies of Finding Nemo the video game. That's how common it is. Though that probably had to do with the game selling extremely well, gaining the bestseller label on each of the 3 consoles, which is pretty impressive. So for this review, I'll be playing both the Xbox and GameCube versions, since those are just the 2 I just so happen to have. But anyways, let's see how well Finding Nemo transitioned well into video games. I love this title screen, by the way. It's so mystical with that calming music. I love it. So the game follows the movie pretty well, and in terms of voice actors, surprisingly most of them have returned. The only ones that didn't return were Marlon, Dory, and Bruce. Though, to be honest, the replacements for these characters aren't that great. While Dory isn't too bad, you can really tell that Marlon and especially Bruce don't have the same voice actors. But here's the weird thing though. In the film clips, Marlon and Dory are not dubbed over by the people who played them in the games. It's the same recordings from the movie. But Bruce has his voice dubbed over in the cutscenes, which I always thought was weird. Like, okay, if all three characters were dubbed in the cutscenes, then that would make sense, but why was Bruce the only one that was dubbed in the cutscenes and not Marlon and Dory?
It's alright, I understand. Why trust a shark, right?
Name's Bruce. It's alright, I understand. Why trust a shark, right?
I guess maybe his original voice actor didn't want the game using his recordings from the movie. I don't know, it's just a weird inconsistency I noticed. The game itself looks pretty good, and I think the models hold up pretty alright. Nothing groundbreaking, but I think the characters translate pretty well into video game form. The game can look a tad too dark at points, like some of these stages get way too dark, but it's only really a problem for like 1 or 2 stages. The music though is really great stuff. We get calming music for the sea, but we also get some pieces that are just awesome. So for once, we have a 2D game on the 6th generation of consoles. Yeah, that's pretty rare for this generation. But basically, it's a 2D side-scroller where you have to either do certain objectives to clear the stage, or just simply get to the end. There are also these chase sections either from the back or the front, which are in full 3D, which I'll talk about in a sec, but for the 2D sections, they control pretty well. I'm not really used to playing 2D games on any of these systems, so it's pretty cool to see a rare game like this try 2D gameplay. You control either Nemo, Marlon, or Dory depending on the stage, but they all basically play the same. The only major difference is their size, which depending on which character you choose, some can get to areas that the others can't. One of the coolest uses of this is in one of the bonus levels, where you actually switch between all of them to complete it, which is really interesting. Now as for the 3D chase sections, these control pretty good as well, but all you're really doing in these sections are either racing someone or getting chased by something. Pretty simple. You know, it's kind of funny that the other fish-based animated movie that came out a little bit after Finding Nemo, Shark Tale, also had a game, and it was also a 2D game with 3D sections, which I always thought was interesting. I guess the underwater environment works better on a 2D plane. So anyways, when I was first playing this game, the first couple levels were a breeze. They weren't hard in the slightest. But then I got to the mask chase level.
Something's wrong with you. Really?
Yeah, this game is hard. I wouldn't say it's as hard as Toy Story 1. At least here you can save and there are no lives, so you can try again as many times as you like. But these levels are still brutal. For one, the only way you can kill enemies are these bubbles, and even then, you're given a short amount of time to kill the enemy stuck in the bubble. Once you trap the enemy in the bubble, you gotta be quick to take it out, because you're only given like 3 seconds to kill it before it breaks free. And these enemies are pretty annoying, so you're best to try and take them out as soon as you can. Secondly, you aren't given that much health. There are these krill that protect you, but they're spread pretty thin, so you best to hold on to them as long as you can. But now let's go over some of these levels. As I mentioned before, the mask chase level is chock full of enemies to dodge, and you're on a time limit, so you gotta be fast. But the submarine level, Man, this was a pain. Once again, a lot of enemies, not to mention your viewing angle is really obscured, which is a problem in a few other stages, but this stage is especially bad with it. And you're going to be accidentally running into enemies and obstacles over and over again. I wouldn't be shocked if kids never beat this stage back then. It's just way too hard, and it's pretty early in the game too. Don't get me wrong, I did like some of these stages. Like, I enjoy all the 3D chase sequences, and levels like the EAC and the jellyfish race are really fun stages. But overall, the stages were a big mixed bag. There are also some side objectives you can do, like gathering these colored rocks and putting them in the correct places, swimming through all the rings, winning a race, and so on. These get you stars, which if you get at least 1 star in a stage, you can unlock a bonus minigame. Nothing too special about these, they're just a distraction if you're bored and you want to 100% this game. But there is one other thing that I haven't mentioned yet that's pretty infamous about this game, and that's the slide puzzles. These slide puzzles are everywhere, and while there are some that are optional, like in the bonus stages, there are a select few which are mandatory to beat the game. Look, if you're good at these slide puzzles, more power to you. I wish I had that power you have, but there are just way too many of these, and they just take so long to actually finish if you don't know what you're doing. Honestly, I had to use a walkthrough on some of these slide puzzles. I was just so bad at them. I will say the music in these slide puzzles are great. It's like the only reason I can somewhat tolerate some of these slide puzzles. Now I need to talk about version differences because oh boy, I have some stuff to say. So I first got this game on the GameCube since, you know, that's my favorite console of all time, and I love using the GameCube controller. That was a pretty big mistake because I don't know if maybe this is another PS2 Wrath of Cortex situation, but the GameCube port is so bad. For one, the frame rate is awful. It honestly hurts my eyes looking at it. Like, again, I'm not picky about frame rate, but it runs like complete garbage on the GameCube. But the absolute worst part about this port is the load times. These can take up to 30 to 40 seconds to load, and these load times are frequent, so every time you exit or enter a stage or you switch menus, you have to sit through one of these load times, and it's just awful, man. Now, I don't have the PlayStation 2 version, but from what I was told, it thankfully doesn't have any of these issues. But if you're thinking of getting this game after watching this video, the version I'd say you should go with is the Xbox version. Smooth frame rate, it looks the best of the console versions, and the load times are much quicker here. Like, it's night and day how fast the load times are compared to the GameCube version. Like, take a look at this comparison. Yeah, right? Much faster. Also, maybe it's just me, but I feel the Xbox version controlled slightly better than the GameCube version, even using the giant Duke controller I have. Like, the GameCube one didn't control bad at all. Like I said, it still controlled pretty well, but the Xbox version feels a little better. But yeah, if you're gonna play this game, avoid getting the GameCube version and just go for the Xbox version. And my final thoughts on this game? It's okay. I like a lot of things about this game, but there is so much holding it back from being really good. The presentation is pretty good, the core gameplay is solid, and the soundtrack is outstanding. But the game's difficulty curve is annoying, there's way too many slide puzzles, the GameCube version has a load of problems, and the game just doesn't have that much replay value outside some of the bonus stages. Again, it's nowhere near the level of frustration as Toy Story 1 was, and it's definitely a lot better than Monsters Inc. on the PS2 was, but I wouldn't rank this very high on my Pixar game totem pole. But the game is so cheap, so if you're really curious, then it wouldn't really hurt to try it out. It goes for like $5 online, and like I said before, I see it everywhere at retro game stores and flea markets, so it's really easy to get. Oh, and by the way, if you live in Europe, apparently the PS2 version is on the PS3. I don't know why it didn't come out here in the US, since a couple other PS2 Pixar games were on the PSN store. But hey, if you live in Europe, hey, you got another option, I guess. So yeah, overall, it's okay. It wouldn't hurt to try it out, but you're not really missing out on anything. But that's all the time we have for today. Next game in this marathon is the Incredibles video game. If you like this video, hit the like button, and if you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button. Also, let me know in the comments if you've played this game. I'm really curious to see what y'all thought of it. But I hope you all have an amazing day, and take care. Bye!